In a freezing Chicago garage, a CEO spots a lone security guard studying by the light of a flashlight. She thinks it's nothing until she learns what that light really stands for. The wind howled through the cracks of the underground parking garage, carrying with it the biting chill of a Chicago winter. Dim fluorescent lights flickered against patches of water on the concrete floor, casting a cold, uneven glow, like the last breaths of a long, exhausting day. It was close to midnight. The 50-story headquarters of Grant and Associates Investment Group, one of the largest financial firms in the Midwest, was almost entirely silent. Only the echo of footsteps remained. They belonged to Melissa Grant, 42, the woman often referred to as the Iron Rose of the investment world. She had just wrapped up a 14-hour meeting, but instead of heading home like most CEOs would, Melissa chose a different route, walking alone through the empty floors of the very building she owned. Not to check on security, not to supervise anyone, but to see the truth. The most honest things about a company, she once told her assistant, don't live inside the boardroom. They live in the corners no one thinks to look at. She called it her undercover walk, a quiet, unannounced routine she'd done for years. No entourage, no notice, no spotlight. Just her and the cold, concrete corridors, places where she sometimes found what no glossy report could ever show. A janitor softly hums to forget fatigue. An IT worker is staying up all night to fix a system glitch. Or sometimes, just silence. But tonight she had no idea this particular undercover walk would change forever the way she saw people, and herself. Melissa pulled her long black coat tighter and stepped into the underground garage. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor, echoing faintly beneath the metallic hum of the automatic door closing behind her. The air was cold and still. Yet to Melissa, this was the place where truth often revealed itself. She strolled, scanning the quiet corners, the places where security guards worked unseen, keeping her empire safe through the night. For a fleeting moment, she felt a quiet reverence for these invisible figures, men and women with no headlines, no titles, yet who kept an entire financial kingdom running. Then, something caught her eye. Far off near the elevator bay, a faint light flickered from behind the security desk. It wasn't from the ceiling lamps, but something softer, warmer, trembling slightly, like the glow of an old flashlight. Melissa frowned. That section was supposed to be completely dark at this hour. Her steps slowed. The echo of her heels softened against the cement. Her breath turned to mist in the frigid air. And when she finally drew close enough to see, she stopped. Before her was a young man in a navy blue security uniform, sitting on the edge of the wall, a pen in hand, eyes fixed on a thick book. The small beam from his flashlight illuminated his face and spilled across the open pages, creating a scene both strange and quietly beautiful. Beside him sat a stack of heavy textbooks, financial management, corporate strategy, microeconomics for business leaders. On his lap lay a notebook filled with neat, meticulous handwriting. Melissa watched him for several seconds, and in that silence, something stirred inside her. It wasn't mere curiosity, nor was it just surprise. It was recognition. The rare, haunting kind that happens when someone successful suddenly sees a reflection of who they once were, in a person the world barely notices. In the cold and darkness of the basement, she thought, there's a light that refuses to go out. Melissa took a quiet step closer and spoke gently. Hey, long night shift, and you're still studying? And it was the moment that would change two lives forever. The man looked up, his eyes still reflecting the faint glow of the small flashlight. For a moment he froze, startled as if he'd just been caught doing something wrong. He stood quickly, closed his book, and slipped a small notebook into his jacket pocket. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just using the quiet time to study a bit," he said softly, his voice trembling with both respect and fear. Melissa smiled faintly, her voice calm and warm. "It's all right. I'm not here to reprimand you. I was just curious. At this hour and this cold, what are you studying?" He hesitated for a second, then replied quietly, "I'm working on my MBA, ma'am. I study at the University of Illinois during the day, and at night I work here as a security guard to pay for tuition and to take care of my son." Melissa glanced around. The only sounds were the faint whistle of air through the vents and the echo of the wind brushing against polished cars gathering dust. He was sitting amid all the symbols of success, yet studying under the dim glow of a flashlight. She crouched slightly, noticing the stack of books beside him. Finance for managers, corporate ethics, business leadership, graduate-level texts, the kind even her senior executives sometimes struggled to finish. Her tone softened. "Why don't you study in the security office upstairs? It's brighter and warmer there." Marcus flushed slightly, his voice low. "There are surveillance cameras in that room, ma'am. I don't want anyone to think I'm slacking off while on duty. Here, I can still watch the entrance, work and study at the same time." The simplicity of that answer made something tighten in Melissa's chest. In an age where so many people look for ways to avoid work, here was a man finding a way to do both, just to keep his chance alive. She looked closer. His hands were rough, the skin hardened, the marks of time spent in the military. Around his wrist, a small leather strap bore an engraved name. "Eli." Melissa asked gently, "Eli, is that your son?" Marcus nodded, a faint, bittersweet smile crossing his face. "He's 8 now. He thinks I work in an office like everyone else. I never told him the truth, because I don't want him to feel ashamed. But really, I'm just a security guard, trying to start over." A cold draft swept through the garage, and the little flashlight flickered. In that trembling light, Melissa suddenly saw more than a tired man. She saw the steady flame of someone who refused to give up. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "You're studying finance. To move up in the company?" Marcus shook his head and smiled faintly. "No, ma'am. I'm studying so I can help people like me, veterans and working families, learn how to manage their finances, save, and live debt-free. Where I grew up, no one ever taught us about finance, and because of that, we stayed stuck." Melissa went silent. His words touched a place deep inside her, a place filled with memories of her own youth, when she, too, studied late into the night in a cramped apartment, with nothing but the dim light of an old desk lamp. "You know," she said quietly, "people often think the most important lessons come from classrooms. But sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the darkness, the kind that forces us to keep moving forward." Marcus looked at her, surprised. He still hadn't realized that the woman standing before him wasn't just another employee, but the very person who ran the entire building. Melissa didn't say another word. She simply looked at him for a long, silent moment, then gave a slight, understanding nod. "Keep going, Marcus. Keep learning, even if it's by this little light." because sometimes it's the ones who study in the dark who end up lighting the world. The words were soft, almost a whisper. But to Marcus, they felt like the kind of encouragement he'd never received before. And he didn't yet know that the woman who spoke them was the one person who would soon change his life forever. The parking garage remained silent. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the vents broke the stillness, blending with the distant hum of cooling engines. The small flashlight still cast its weak glow across the wall, a light too faint to chase away the darkness, yet bright enough to keep faith alive. Melissa stood there quietly, watching as Marcus gathered his books and stacked his papers neatly. Each book was a fragment of the dream, preserved through sleepless nights. No one saw it. No one praised it. But it was the kind of effort that quietly changes the world. She spoke softly. "Marcus, how long have you been working here?" He answered evenly, 3 years, ma'am. I started right after my son was born. The night shift pays better, so I can attend classes during the day and still have a few hours with him in the afternoon." Melissa nodded gently, her expression softening. "Sounds like a schedule with no room to rest." He smiled wearily but kindly. "Sometimes I do get tired, but when I see Eli sleeping peacefully, I tell myself, just a little longer. I don't want him growing up thinking dreams are only for the rich." That line made something inside Melissa's heart sink. For a moment she saw her younger self, the girl who once studied in a cramped apartment, beneath the flicker of a yellow bulb, dreaming of a future no one believed she could reach. She took a step closer, her voice lower, softer. "Marcus, if you were given the chance to work in finance, not just study it, would you take it?" Marcus froze for a beat. Then he chuckled, thinking she was joking. "An opportunity like that? Not likely, ma'am. I've got no experience, no degree yet. I'm barely halfway through my program." Melissa smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Sometimes experience isn't what matters most. There are people with years of experience who've lost their faith. But you have something many people upstairs no longer do. The will never to give up." Marcus fell silent. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but there was something in her tone, sincerity, strength, that cut through the cold air. Then Melissa took another step forward. The flashlight beam shimmered across her face, and in that moment, Marcus finally noticed her eyes, sharp, steady, and not the eyes of an ordinary employee. She extended her hand gently. "I'm Melissa Grant, CEO of this company." Marcus froze. His entire body stiffened, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you say?" She nodded lightly, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "I just left a meeting on the 50th floor. I came down here to see the people who truly keep this company running. And I found you. Someone doing what so many have forgotten. Investing in yourself." Before he could respond, she continued, firm but warm. "I have an offer for you. I would like you to join our financial advisory department as a part-time paid intern. I'll arrange an internal scholarship to help you complete your MBA more quickly. And as for this night shift, someone else will take over." Marcus's breath caught. He looked at her with disbelief, his voice trembling. I'm just a security guard. Are you sure? I've never worked in an office. I don't have the qualifications. What if I mess everything up? Melissa let out a soft laugh, not the laugh of authority, but the knowing smile of someone who'd once stood where he was. Marcus, people can teach you how to analyze numbers, but no one can teach you perseverance. And that's what I'm looking for. She held his gaze for a long moment, then added, her voice steady like a promise, if you have the courage to believe in yourself, then I'll be the first to believe in you. In that instant, the air itself seemed to still. The flickering light of the small flashlight danced in Marcus's eyes, like a flame suddenly fed with new fuel. He clenched his fist, gently lowering his head. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Melissa smiled, her final words soft but unforgettable. No, Marcus. It's you, the man studying in the dark, who's helped me see the true light of leadership again. 2 weeks after that fateful night, on a cold Chicago morning, Marcus Lee stepped out of the elevator on the 42nd floor of Grant & Associates. Outside the glass windows, snow fell lightly, scattering silver reflections across the skyscrapers. He tightened his fists and took a deep breath. This was no longer the night shift in the garage. It was his first day as an office employee. He wore a crisp white shirt, bought with what little remained of his last paycheck. The sleeves were a bit loose, the collar stiff and unfamiliar, but he stood tall, doing his best to look confident. In his pocket he carried an old pen, the same one that had seen him through countless nights of studying in the dark. His hands, still rough and calloused, trembled slightly as he touched the smooth glass surface of the desk. Mr. Marcus? A bright, friendly voice called from the reception desk. Welcome to the Community Financial Advisory Department. Ms. Grant told us you'd be joining us today. Marcus smiled awkwardly and nodded. Thank you. I just hope I don't mess anything up. Don't worry, the young woman said with a smile. Everyone starts somewhere. He was shown to a small desk near the window. All around him were well-dressed advisors speaking in terms he barely understood. ROI, asset mix, diversification strategy. It felt like another world, bright, busy, full of energy, and completely foreign. Behind the glass walls of the meeting room, Melissa Grant stood watching. She saw him sitting there, slightly nervous but with eyes that still held a quiet fire, the kind that fear could only veil, not extinguish. She smiled softly. She knew this was where Marcus belonged, even if he didn't believe it yet. The first few weeks were far from easy. Marcus often stayed late after everyone had left, quietly reviewing each process and rereading reports that others had finished hours ago. He took meticulous notes, studied every small detail, and practiced client communication in front of the mirror. Some nights, close to midnight, he was still there, eyes red, exhausted, but unwilling to leave. One night, when the office lights had long been turned off, Melissa happened to pass by and saw him still at his desk. She knocked gently on the doorframe. "You're still here?" Marcus looked up, smiling faintly. "I couldn't quite understand some parts of the financial analysis draft. I wanted to go over it again, to make sure I don't make mistakes tomorrow." Melissa stepped inside, leaning slightly on the edge of his desk. Her voice softened. "Marcus, no one expects you to be perfect from day one. All they need to see is that you're moving forward, and you're doing that better than anyone could have hoped." He lowered his head, speaking quietly but with sincerity. "Thank you, but I'm not just learning for the job. I'm learning because someone believed in me and I don't want to let that belief go to waste." Melissa said nothing for a moment. Her throat tightened. That sentence, simple yet raw, brought back the image of that night. The dim flashlight glow, the man studying in the cold, the small light that had somehow been strong enough to change not only his life, but hers. Time passed, and that small light began to spread. 6 months later, Marcus was no longer an intern. He had become one of the most trusted and beloved financial advisors at Grant & Associates. He didn't rely on fancy graphs or complex terminology. He told stories about fathers, mothers, and veterans struggling to make ends meet. He showed them how to save and how to invest, just enough to live with peace of mind. One elderly client held his hand, her voice trembling. "You're the first person who's made me realize money isn't something to fear, but a tool to protect my family." Marcus simply smiled. He didn't notice that in the corner of the room Melissa stood watching quietly, her eyes filled with pride. For the first time in years as CEO, what moved her wasn't rising revenue or expanding market shares. It was this: seeing a man who once studied in the dark, now standing in the light, and sharing that light with others. Sometimes, she thought, the true transformation of a company doesn't come from strategy or profit, but from the moment someone rises from the basement and makes everyone believe in their own light again. The following spring, Chicago began to thaw after months of bitter cold. Snow melted into thin streams along the sidewalks, glistening under the pale morning sun. Inside the glass-walled conference room on the 45th floor, Marcus Lee sat across from Melissa Grant. Spread across the table were revenue reports, charts, and a proposal, handwritten in blue ink, titled Veteran and Working Families Finance Program. Melissa held the document in her hands, reading carefully. She looked up, meeting Marcus's steady gaze. "You want to start a financial counseling program specifically for veterans and working families?" Marcus nodded. His voice was low but firm. "Yes, ma'am. I used to be one of them. Remember? The people who don't know where to start, who can't understand why money always slips through their fingers. They don't need an expert speaking in jargon. They need someone who's been in their shoes, who speaks their language, who understands their fears." He paused, his eyes shining with quiet conviction. "I believe that if we help them take control of their finances, we can help them rebuild their faith. And when a person regains faith, they can change their whole life." The room fell silent for a few seconds. Only the faint sound of the wind brushed against the curtain. Melissa placed the proposal gently on the table and leaned back. Her gaze was thoughtful, a mix of pride and reflection. "You know, Marcus," she said softly, "the night I met you in that garage, all I saw was a man studying by flashlight in the dark. But now I realize that light wasn't just guiding you. It has the power to guide hundreds of others." She nodded slowly, a proud smile forming on her face. "Do it. I want you to lead this project. No longer as an intern, but as someone who creates real change." Marcus froze. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. You mean it? You want me to lead an entire division?" Melissa smiled. "That's right. Build your own team. Find people with the same heart. They don't have to be perfect, just willing to learn and help others, like you once did." In that moment, Marcus couldn't speak. He looked down at his calloused hands, the same hands that had once trembled as they held a pen in the cold darkness of the garage. And now, those same hands were being trusted to create light for others. "Thank you, Melissa," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "Thank you for believing in me, before I ever believed in myself." Melissa smiled gently. "No, Marcus, you taught me something. That steadfast belief doesn't come from title or status. It begins with courage." From that day on, a new department was born at Grant & Associates. Its name was simple: Community Finance Division. But to Marcus, it wasn't just a department. It was a promise renewed. He handpicked a diverse group of advisors. Some were veterans, some former waiters, others people who had once lost their jobs. The first thing he taught them wasn't how to advise clients. It was how to listen. Clients don't need someone who understands money, Marcus told them. They need someone who understands them. And he was right. Within just 6 months, the program Marcus founded helped hundreds of working families regain financial stability, escaping debt, saving for their children's education, and rebuilding their confidence. Some called to thank him, others wrote letters. A few cried during their sessions. One middle-aged veteran once told him, his voice trembling, "You know, Marcus, I used to think my life was just about paying off debts. But because of you, I realized I still have a future worth fighting for." Each time he heard words like that, Marcus remembered that cold night in the garage, the faint glow of a small flashlight cutting through the darkness. And he understood. Sometimes, light isn't meant to shine for yourself, but to help others find their way home. 18 months later, the grand ballroom of Grant & Associates gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the soft hum of piano music filling the air. It was the night of the annual charity gala, the company's most prestigious event, honoring those who had made an extraordinary impact. The room shimmered with warmth and elegance. Laughter, light, and quiet anticipation filled the air. Standing on stage, dressed in a deep sapphire gown, Melissa Grant held no script in her hands. Before her sat hundreds of employees, partners, and guests, but her eyes sought only one person, Marcus Lee, seated in the front row, his hand gently holding that of his young son, Eli. The 8-year-old boy beamed with pride, his crisp white shirt and eyes fixed on his father. Melissa lifted the microphone, her voice calm yet resonant. 2 years ago, on one of the coldest nights in Chicago, I saw a small light flickering in the basement garage of this very building. The entire room fell silent. At first, I thought it was just the flashlight of a security guard, but it turned out to be the light of a dream. She paused for a heartbeat, glancing toward Marcus, smiling softly. That night, I met Marcus Lee, a single father, a veteran, a man studying for his MBA under a flashlight, because he wanted to help working families understand finance and build a better future. A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. Eyes glistened with tears. Today, that man no longer sits in a dark garage. He now leads a department that 2 years ago he could only dream of. The Community Finance Division has helped hundreds of families escape debt, find stability, and rediscover hope. Melissa's tone softened, rich with pride. That is why tonight, I am honored to present the Employee Excellence Award to Marcus Lee, not just for his results, but for reminding me that the brightest light in business doesn't come from revenue. It comes from people. Applause erupted across the hall, loud, heartfelt, thunderous. Marcus rose, lifting his son into his arms as they walked to the stage amid cheers and camera flashes. Melissa handed him a small, clear crystal award, luminous, reflecting the very light his story had come to symbolize. Marcus took the microphone. He looked around the hall, pausing for a moment before speaking in a voice that trembled yet stood firm. 3 years ago, I was a night shift security guard, studying under a flashlight in a cold, dark garage. I never imagined that one day I'd stand here, in the light, among people like all of you. He turned to his son, smiling softly. My boy once asked me, Dad, was that little light really enough for you to study? And tonight, I can tell him that light didn't just help me see the pages of a book. It helped me see myself. The hall fell silent again. Then Marcus looked toward Melissa, gratitude shimmering in his eyes. Thank you, Melissa. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me a purpose. You gave me a chance to help others, the same way you helped me. He took a deep breath, his voice steady and clear. I've learned that the most important light isn't the one that helps you read your own page, but the one that helps others see their path. When he finished, the room erupted into a standing ovation, long, emotional, unending. Some wiped tears. Others simply stood in awe. Melissa bowed her head, smiling, a smile filled with pride and humility. That night after the ceremony, Melissa quietly slipped away from the ballroom. Her heels clicked softly down the empty hall until she reached the garage, the same place where 2 years earlier she had stopped by chance. The space looked different now. In the corner where Marcus once sat studying, there was now a small wooden desk, a leather chair, and a desk lamp, always kept on. On the wall above it hung a simple brass plaque, engraved with the words, Dreams grow stronger in the dark, if someone believes in your light. Melissa stood there for a long time. The warm golden glow of the lamp reflected softly in her eyes as she whispered to herself, leadership isn't about creating light for yourself. It's about helping others find theirs. Then she turned and strolled up the stairs. The light behind her faded, but in her eyes, it shone brighter than ever. Sometimes, she thought, what transforms an entire organization isn't a grand idea, but a small light in the dark. Because beneath those quiet basements, there are always people still learning, believing, just waiting for one chance to shine. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a small light in their life. Like, comment, and subscribe to Deep Life Tales, where every story reminds us that true light always begins within.